Hello friends, we're going to do a little demo here today of the Earth Tools tiller depth system. This is the depth roller that we've made here at Earth Tools to regulate the tilling depth of the rototiller implements for the BCS machines. As mentioned in an earlier video, this is designed by us here at Earth Tools. It will fit the 26-inch or 30-inch BCS tillers, although the roller size is 30-inch. So if you're putting it on a 26-inch tiller, you're just going to have to live with the fact that the roller is a little wider. This is, as mentioned in our other video, which you may have seen, this contraption was actually an idea of ours 3 or 4 years ago, and we built a prototype or two. They didn't pan out. We kind of shelved the thing, and unfortunately left it shelved a little too long because BCS actually came out with one of these implements of their own. They call it the Precision Depth Roller, which is, you know, it does the job, but we feel that we could do it better. So once we saw theirs, we're like, oh, we need to get this project back out of the mothballs. We got it out, revised it, went through 3 or 4 more revisions, came up with a system that is 6 inches shorter than BCS's, so it's much easier to handle, and also has more versatility built into it because it has 2 optional roller styles depending on the job you're doing. The roller that's on there now, if you want to bring the camera around, Sophie Dufour is on the camera here. She's my 11-year-old daughter. So right now we've got on here a solid steel roller. Well, it's not solid steel, it's a tubular steel roller, but it's solid in that it doesn't have any perforations in it. This allows the bed to be pressed out perfectly and give a nice flat, perfectly smooth bed. And it also keeps the roller from filling up with any soil. The problem we had with our prototypes was we were trying to use a slotted or mesh style roller, and the thing is the tiller discharges soil to the rear, so it was always filling it up. So we went with a solid roller as our standard roller for bed preparation and seed bed forming. We also have an optional cage roller, which we mentioned in our other video, which can be installed in about 2 minutes for when you want to do weed control with the tiller and not have the roller press all the seed or the uprooted plants back into the soil. We'll run that in a little bit. Right now I'm going to run a little demo. This is our height adjustment. Right now we've got it all the way down on the lever, which is pushing the roller down far enough to actually hold the tines off the ground about a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to go ahead and let this up, and let's see, we're going to select, I don't know, that's about 1 inch there, maybe 1 inch working depth, maybe 1.5 inches. Let's fire this baby up. This is a BCS 749. Go. Let's take a look at how nice this bed is. Got a nice flat bed. Of course, it wasn't terribly flat to start with. It was pretty lumpy, but you can see how it's been pressed down. Some of the air has been pressed out of the bed, so you get a nice flat, bed with a firm top for good seed to soil contact and very good performance with precision multi-row seeders. Now, I will point out that if this tool had been a power harrow that I was using, the bed would be even flatter than this in terms of straightening out the kind of left to right variation you see. This bed actually hasn't been worked this year. It's kind of last year's bed. I think the last thing we had here was potatoes, so it was a very uneven surface to begin with, or not very, but it was somewhat uneven from where I'd run the potato digger through it. So the tiller, as I pointed out in my last video on the tiller depth system, the tiller doesn't have a good way to distribute soil left and right under it. It distributes soil kind of front to back and, vertically. The power harrow, because of its tines rotating, multiple axis rotating in vertical fashion, it actually distributes the soil horizontally beneath it. So it would have taken this bed and taken a lumpy surface and just made it perfectly flat like a board. So that is an advantage you get out of a power harrow that you don't necessarily get out of a tiller. Now another pass over this with a tiller would help. It would help redistribute some of that soil and flatten things out, but it's pretty darn good. I mean, if I was seeding, I wouldn't worry about it. So anyway, as you could see, as I moved forward, I was playing with the tiller depth adjustment some. I started out around 2 inches roughly, 1.5 inches. That's right in here. Yeah, that's about the hard spot right there. That's probably about 2 inches. And then I moved it deeper to probably 3 inches in here. You know, 2.5, 3 inches, a little deeper, not much. Probably a little deeper right up here, yeah. It's more like it. And then I skimmed it back to just probably 3/4 of a half an inch deep right up here. Yeah, this is just scratching the surface. So that's how you would do for weed control or stale bedding or something like that. Although in that condition you would probably have the cage roller on there rather than the solid roller. But if there's no plants to root, then it doesn't matter if you're using the solid roller. So we've got a complete height adjustment range here of almost 4 inches. Basically it goes from minus 3/4 of an inch to that is minus 3/4 of an inch, meaning it raises the tiller off the ground about 3/4 of an inch for transport, and then gets you to a maximum depth of about 3 inches. We figured that if somebody is going to be using the tiller for maximum depth tillage, that is, if you want to do a deep till, you're just going to take this thing off. Why do you want to haul around a bunch of extra weight and length if you're going to be deep tilling anyway? So even though BCS's tiller depth system, or precision depth roller as they call it, does have a wider range of adjustment that allows you to go up to 6 inches deep, we figured, hey, you know, that's probably not practical, because the real reason for using this anyway is to get a shallow till. So we are able to take this depth roller off in about 1.5 minutes with 3 bolts, 1 nut and bolt here, 1 shoulder bolt on each side, and you're done. It just slides right off the back. The flap stays in place. That is, the original flap stays in place in the tiller and just passes through here, so you don't have to take that on and off like you do with BCS's system. So this is a lot nicer to work with that way in terms of getting it on and off. Also, you'll notice that even though we don't have a rubber flap replacing the steel flap like BCS's, we still don't get soil thrown out on the side. The bed is nice and clean. We don't have a bunch of soil sprayed out the side because our roller is close enough to the back of the tiller and everything is enclosed well enough with these big side panels on here that everything is encapsulated. You're not going to lose a bunch of soil out of your bed each time. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the mesh style roller, and then we're going to run a little video where I've got some weeds up here, and we'll see what that looks like. Right, so we've got our mesh roller, or not a mesh roller, our cage roller or bar roller installed now, and we're going to run through this patch of weeds. Now this has not been worked since last year. It's grown up in crabgrass. It's a little bad. I mean, you can shoot on towards the front of the tractor. I mean, crabgrass getting ready to go to seed here, or it is going to seed. Hopefully you won't let your pathways or whatever you're trying to cultivate with the tiller get this out of control. So, you know, after I cultivate this, I'm sure these weeds are going to retake, because this has very established roots. But regardless, this is what we've got to work with, so we're going to shoot it. Not bad. Not bad. Now, Some of these roots aren't completely uprooted, but it did a pretty nice job uprooting it. As you can see, the cage roller does not press everything down and have a nice smooth bed top. So, you know, you get a little fluffier finish here where you have more of a chance of these things actually getting killed by some sun with the uprooted nature of them. Probably should have gone a little deeper because of the deep roots of some of these crabgrass, but it's not bad. It's pretty much uprooted. Yeah, they're uprooted in here, and they're not pressed back down. Now you can see that the mesh roller or the cage roller, I keep calling it a mesh roller, the cage roller is picking up a little bit of fluff in here, especially since I went through some mulch. I'd put some old grass clippings on part of this bed, and that mulch is getting thrown in there by the rototiller tines, and that's what's building up in here. This is all just you know, desiccated grass clippings. There's not really any dirt. So interesting. This thing, it basically works like we intended. We've tested it before. If it's just dirt you're working with and some weeds, it'll just kind of sift through the roller and not really build up. We hadn't tried it with this mulch before, so that's interesting that it's actually picking up the mulch, but it's not a big deal. Obviously the mulch is not going to make it real heavy. But that stuff is so fluffy that once the tiller discharges it in there, it's easier for it to stay in place than fall through the hole. But yeah, it's done a pretty nice job here. We'll walk back here to where we didn't have any mulch. You can see there's mulch all right here. That's all grass clippings. But here is previous to where the grass clippings are, and you can definitely see a rougher finish, more roots kind of up in the air. Of course, some of them are buried just because a rototiller mixes everything, so you have no guarantee that the roots are going to end up on the surface. But at least there's you know, it's not all pressed down, you know, as it would be with a solid roller or a more solid type of roller, so you get more of this fluffy finish. So there it is. There's your weed control system, and it converts back and forth between the two in about a minute and a half, 3 bolts. So actually 2 bolts for converting, sorry. It's 3 bolts to take the roller completely off, 2 bolts to convert the roller styles. Also want to point out that partway through the cultivation process here, I switched from first gear to second gear. And second gear is typically what you're going to want to cultivate in. There's no point beating your soil to death in first gear. The way the BCS machines are geared, and the Grillo machines for that matter, any of these Italian walk-behind tractors, they have a how shall I say, an independently driven PTO from the wheel speeds. Meaning when you change from one gear to the next, your wheels will go faster or slower, but your PTO speed stays the same relative to your engine speed. So by going faster, say if I started out in first gear, so I was going slow, and then I started going faster, but I didn't change my throttle setting, that is, I geared up to second gear, but I didn't change my throttle setting. So now the tines are turning the same speed they were before, but the wheels are turning twice as fast, which means I'm covering the ground a lot quicker, and the relative tine speed has slowed down. It hasn't really slowed, but as for every forward inch of travel that the tractor does, the tines are taking fewer bites. You know, we've doubled the number of forward inches of travel per tine revolution. So that beats up the soil less. It moves quickly over the ground, which is all you need for weed control. In fact, for light weeds, you could even run the thing in third gear and really get the job done. And also critical, as I mentioned in my last video, or one of my last videos about tillers in general, it's best to keep your throttle speed low. This whole video segment, I've not run the engine speed over half throttle. For weeding, you could even run it less than that. That is, you're not here to bust the soil to smithereens. You just want to chop it up a little bit and get the weeds uprooted. Now, if you're making a seed bed, you might want to run it a hair faster, but, you know, running over 2/3 throttle with a tiller is really not necessary, because if you do, you're just going to really atomize your soil the way the tiller slings that soil up against the underside of the hood and smashes it to dust. We're trying to avoid that. I think that's about it. I'm going to fire this thing up and go back to the barn. Thanks again, Sophie.